Hello and welcome to Buzz Talk. Here we talk about business analysis from different perspectives and how to continuously evolve in the profession while keeping yourself sane. Your hosts are Sophie
and Anna.
And today we will talk about non-functional requirements. We've slightly touched upon this topic in one of our previous videos when we've spoken about top interview questions. And this raised some interest from the audience. So we decided to record a dedicated episode. NFRs or non-functional requirements is one type of requirements that business analysts have to deal with on a daily basis. And we would like to dig deeper on this topic today.
Yeah, and as for agenda today, we will start with brief overview. What are those non-functional requirements? Are some categories of non-functional requirements, and especially we will highlight a bit more in detail such requirements as certification, performance, security, and accessibility. But to begin with, let's start with definition. So non-functional requirements are also known as quality attributes or a quality of service requirements. They define system attributes such as security, reliability, performance, maintainability, scalability, and usability. They serve as constraints or restrictions on the design of the system, as well as they ensure its effectiveness and usability. Sophie?
Yeah, and to illustrate one example of non-functional requirements, we can say that such requirement can sound as the site should load in less than 3 minutes with the amount of concurrent users more than 1,000. That will be one example.
Yeah, and another example could be that user data shall not be stored into the system or should be stored on some specific server in some specific country. So it depends on the country regulations or something like that.
Yeah, and why those requirements are so important? Well, first of all, failing to meet some of the non-functional requirements can result not only in the business users not being satisfied or user goals not being met, but also in even fines or sanctions if some government imposed requirements are not met. So let's dig deeper in this.
Let's talk maybe a bit more into categories of those non-functional requirements, because you might simply overlook them because you don't know that this is a non-functional requirement you need to focus on, or you do not understand how critical is it or where to get the data about it. So the categories are availability, compatibility, functionality, maintainability, performance efficiency, portability, reliability, scalability, security, usability, certification, compliance, localization, service level agreements, and extensibility. This is really the shortest checklist on non-functional requirements. However, there is much more. So those categories can be expanded into the subcategories and so on. But this list you can take as an initial thing for you to think about, like areas where you need to consider if there is anything missing for your project. So, Sophie, could you tell me what type of non-functional requirements give you a food for thought? Like, what was your maybe most painful requirements you need to deal with from?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know about painful, but I will tell you about the last requirements I had to deal with in greater detail from the non-functional category. Those were certification requirements. My project that I am working for develops apps for different platforms. Those are web, iOS, Android. Also, we develop applications for such set-top boxes as Xbox and PlayStation. You probably all know about those. Also, Roku devices. So all those devices, they need to pass certification before being accepted for usage. Let's say iOS app or Android app, they cannot be sold or presented in the App Store or Google Play, if I'm not mistaken, without being certified. And if you get to know about those requirements late in the day or late in the development process, that will cause a lot of rework and it will be very expensive. That's why it's very important to know about those minimum requirements that are required to requirements that are required for the app to be accepted, in order to plan accordingly and not to have to do any reworks. In my case, it wasn't painful, thankfully, because we were aware of that in the beginning and we planned so that our app is compliant. But still, even those certification requirements, they can be updated while you're developing the app. So you need to be constantly monitoring the official sources for the platform you're developing. And if the new release comes, the business analyst needs to be the first person to actually know about this and inform the team and make sure that, we've included what we need as a team. If to tell you one example of what that can be, for example, users should always be able to opt out from the cookies or other data that you are gathering. So even if the user agreed for you to collect their data, they need to have that place in the app where they can always make sure that they stop allowing you to use their data. If you don't have this in your app, it will not pass the certification. What about you, Anna?
Okay, nice one. From my perspective, the most, I would not also say painful, but the most requirements that I put a lot of thought in is accessibility requirements, because you will face the need to be compliant with accessibility guidelines if you are working on the project that will be widely accessible in web. And those guidelines have quite a lot of topics that you need to cover. So first of all, if you're joining the project that will develop such product for a wide audience, you need to always think, okay, this product should be accessible. And then the next step will go to the client or the customer and ask, do they consider that this product should be accessible, and whether they have some specific requirements you need to focus on besides the one that are in guidelines, because the guidelines cover for 3 levels from A1 to AAA, and this is kind of the scale that you need to focus on. So first level A1 you for sure need to cover, A2 also quite required, and AAA is negotiable, depends how far you would like to go and how much money you would like to spend. So first go talk with the client. I usually ask the clients how do they will monitor, check those levels of compliance, should we take a part on this and ensure that they are compliant to such level, and what type of checklist we need to use. This is something to agree. Or if there will be some third-party agency who will audit us afterwards, so we can ask them give us some checklist of what we need to consider while we are developing. Another thing that with regards to accessibility is that there is 2 approaches, how you can include them in your development process. Either you will consider those requirements while you're building the system, and kind of inject them into between the functional requirements, or you can focus completely on those non-functional requirements and add them as separate stories. Beside that, you can consider another approach here. So build into the system, into the code, and use third-party integration, which will help you with all the accessibility guidelines, and you just need to ensure that this third-party tool is merged correctly to your website or your product. So there is a couple of ways to look into this, and my biggest advice here would be do not deprioritize those requirements, because as long as you deprioritize them, they start costing you a fortune.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And maybe one thing to add from my experience, at least with accessibility requirements, in projects where I worked, they were front-end heavy. Yes, they were visually heavy. So accessibility, of course, it can be on 2 sides, on the front end and also in the code. But in my examples, the burden of complying with accessibility requirements laid heavily on the UX UI team. So we worked closely with the UX UI team to make sure that when they design, they have all the information available and they are aware what are those guidelines, but they were responsible as a team to design accessibly, if you can say it this way. So yeah, close cooperation with UIX here will help, definitely. And to add to your point that clients may not always know or be aware about those requirements, I totally agree with you. And it's not only about accessibility, it's probably to all non-functional requirements, because clients know what they want, but they don't usually think about those, details that will either make or break your application. And that's where we as business analysts come. And I think we can give one tip here, how to not to miss them. And we prepared.
Can I go on?
Yeah, sure. So we prepared a checklist for you. Anna, I basically already read the main requirements from the list, but we will also attach it to this video so you all guys can check it out and integrate in your daily routine of collecting requirements.
Yeah, and the last point, as we are starting adding points, so I would like to add one more point. So when you're thinking about non-functional requirements, usually it will go hand in hand with some more technical requirements, for instance, as SEO or analytics, or even the security will be also go hand in hand with those requirements. So, for instance, a lot of accessibility requirements help you to build SEO-friendly website. And if you don't feel that you can convey your client that accessibility requirements is important, you may talk to the people from the SEO team and ask them to help you and support you in your negotiations, that you need to focus on this as well.
Good one. That's a very valid point. If you have such people like SEO, I don't think I've ever had such people in my team, but it's a very valid point if I will sometimes.
Yeah, like in my case, the SEO team is quite helpful.
All right.
So
I think that's we can talk forever about non-functional requirements because there's so many of them, but I think that will be good enough to know at least what those are and have some ideas. And if you guys have any questions to specific non-functional requirements or would like to hear more, we will be happy to read this in comments and report something for you.
Yeah, and do not forget, click subscribe button and share it with your friends who might be also interested in the topic. So see you soon.
See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.